Good evening. This has been a year of remembrance, of ceremonies to mark so many different milestones. But tonight is the final act to commemorate the final end to World War II, VJ Day. Perhaps the last great act of commemoration for most of those old soldiers who fought their way to victory. In the next few hours, we shall be bringing the nation together to honor them, to remember those who gave their lives, and to celebrate that victory. Many were here yesterday, of course. 10,000 old soldiers of an army largely forgotten as it battled against the might of Japan, but now proudly marching to the cheers of a nation which has finally recognized the debt we owe them. They joined in the party later along the Thames as 20 tons of fireworks burst overhead. And this afternoon, some of them joined the Queen Mother for a drumhead service in Wick, near her Scottish home, the Castle of May. It will end here at Buckingham Palace, where people are just beginning to gather, as they did 50 years ago, this time for a sunset ceremony. But it all begins where so many great ceremonies of state have taken place, in Horse Guards Parade. Our commentator there, Tom Fleming.
Horse Guards Parade, a space that has echoed to martial music for over 3 centuries. A space surrounded by memorials to heroes of wars that ended long ago. Earl Roberts won his VC during the Indian Mutiny and fought for the Empire in Afghanistan and South Africa. Viscount Wolseley, his contemporary, was a veteran of wars in Burma, the Crimea, India, China and the Nile. A memorial to 14,000 men of the Guards regiments killed in the First Great War of this century, and over 5,000 who died in the Second. Earl Mountbatten, as Supreme Allied Commander Southeast Asia, received the unconditional surrender of the Japanese in Singapore 50 years ago. He knew this parade ground well. Wellington, perhaps the most famous of all our military heroes, had his office in the little room above the central archway that overlooks Horse Guards. And on his retirement, he rode into Civvy Street across the very ground where now the massed bands of the 3 services have just been playing Walton's Crown Imperial, written for the coronation of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth in 1937. On the stage, a choir of 300 voices and an orchestra. They'll be joined later by 800 children, the massed mounted bands of the Household Cavalry, the pipes and drums of the Gurkhas, in an evening of rich spectacle and deep emotion, which will be shared by Her Majesty the Queen, who arrives shortly. And by 13,000 people in the stands. Many are veterans of the Second World War, and in particular the war in the Far East. But then all of us, young and old, have been profoundly affected by the outcome of that war whose ending half a century ago we now recall. And not just in London is that remembrance being honoured, but in all the distinctive nations that make up this United Kingdom.
Noswaith Dda, a very good evening to you from Cardiff Castle. In the presence of the Prince of Wales, the Welsh capital celebrates 50 years of peace, and celebrates it in a pretty traditional way, with a splendid festival of music. Some of it rousing, some of it rather less poignant. This evening, led by the Prince of Wales, the crowd is paying tribute to the veterans and to the comrades they lost. In an open letter to the people of Wales, the Prince says that it's the dedication and heroism of those who are fighting right up to the end of the war that is being remembered today. Those memories will of course be triggered once again when the armed services put on their special displays within the medieval walls of Cardiff Castle. The golden thread tying all of the events together is music, including the massed choirs from every part of Wales. It should be a fitting tribute to those Welshmen and women who lost their lives in action, and to the thousands who worked at home, not least in the coal mines, to keep the war effort going. Tonight's festival says thank you, diolch o galon, to every one of them.
Welcome to the scene of Ulster's commemoration. Carrickfergus Castle in its 800 years has witnessed much of the ancient warfare of these islands. It was captured in turn by the English, Scots, Irish and even French, and King William III landed here for his campaign to replace James II. A short time ago the Duke of York arrived. Today he's met many Ulster veterans of the Far East campaign, and later will take the salute at a beating of the retreat ceremony. Offshore lies HMS Liverpool, the first major warship to visit here since the Troubles began. During the war, Belfast Lough was often crowded with such ships, assembling for Atlantic convoys or coming in for refit at Belfast Shipyard. Many veterans are here tonight to pay tribute to their comrades who died in the Pacific, among them the Royal Enniskilling Fusiliers and a Belfast Artillery Regiment who took part in the final ejection of the Japanese from Burma. Later, as well as the massed bands of the services, you'll be able to enjoy music and dancing with a particularly local flavour.
Welcome to Edinburgh and to the castle high above the city, glowing as the sun goes down, where these ancient ramparts will be the setting for Scotland's celebration and commemoration. They'll ring to the sound of pipes and martial music. They'll fall quiet for the solemn memories of 9,000 war veterans and people from more than 100 service organisations who are soon to be joined here on the castle esplanade by Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal. These are people who do remember. This event has been designed to bring veterans together. There are some old soldiers here who may see friends they haven't seen for 50 years. And the happenings here will be seen by many beyond these walls. They've closed Princes Street and the crowds are gathering there far below us to watch everything on giant screens. When you return, it'll be to the thrilling sound of the massed pipes and drums, playing the tunes that take every old soldier back to the war in the Far East or back to the war in Europe.
And here in Horse Guards, the warm summer evening air is enriched with the strains of Hubert Parry's great coronation anthem, I Was Glad, written for the coronation of King Edward VII in 1902 and sung at every coronation since, including that of his great-granddaughter 51 years later. And at this moment, Her Majesty the Queen is approaching Horse Guards. The travelling escort of lifeguards and the barouche carrying Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh now just arriving on the parade ground. And as she steps from her carriage, she will once again be greeted by the words of the great acclamation, Vivat Regina, long live the Queen. The little barouche drawn by two horses, Iceland and Twilight, and the barouche driven by the Queen's Head coachman, Colin Henderson. Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh greeted by Lord Bramall, who is the Queen's Lord Lieutenant for Greater London. Prince Edward with Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh. And she moves up to the Royal Box, which faces the Horse Guards building and where already there are other members of the royal family. The Duke and Duchess of Gloucester here, Princess Alexandra of Kent and Sir Angus Ogilvy, Prince and Princess Michael of Kent. Queen Mother, as you've heard, has been in Wick today, and if she is watching at Castle of May, we send her loyal greetings on this very special occasion when she's so much in our minds. Duke of York's been in Belfast, Princess Royal is in Edinburgh, and the Prince of Wales and his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, are in Cardiff. And the Queen, already movingly greeted by that great coronation anthem, is now greeted by the national anthem. The musicians' orchestra and the choir of 300 singers from 7 famous London choirs are conducted by Sir David Wilcox, once, like Parry, 80 years before him, a director of the Royal College of Music. And now, as the time-honoured evening ceremony of beating retreat begins, the orchestra is joined by the band of the Royal Marine School of Music, the regimental bands of Her Majesty's Grenadier, Coldstream and Scots Guards, the Central Band of the Royal Air Force, under the direction of the Senior Director of Music, Household Division, Lieutenant Colonel David Price, Scots Guards, playing the fourth of Sir Edward Elgar's 5 Pomp and Circumstance Marches. A medley now of tunes from the Commonwealth, from Australia, from India, from Canada, from New Zealand, and from South Africa comes Sari Murray. about to go to Wales, but first here on Horse Guards, words by Dylan Thomas, spoken by George Thomas, former Speaker of the House of Commons, now Lord Tony Pandy.
This sea town was my world. Outside, a strange Wales, cold-pitted, mountains, river run, full as far as I knew of choirs and sheep and storybook tall huts, moved about its business, which was none of mine. Beyond that unknown Wales lay England, which was London, and the country called the Front, from which so many of our neighbours never came back. At the beginning, the only front I knew was the little lobby before our front door. I could not understand why so many people never returned from there. And death shall have no dominion. No more may gulls cry at their ears, or waves break loud on the seashores. Where blew a flower, may a flower no more lift its head to the blows of the rain, though they be mad and dead as nails. Heads of the characters hammer through daisies, break in the sun till the sun breaks down, and death shall have no dominion.
Leah Marion Jones from Pembrokeshire with her rendition of A Nevoy, Heaven by Osborne Roberts, and surely that will have inspired the entire crowd here in Cardiff to join in the great Welsh hymn Cwm Rhondda.
From Wales, such singing. At Horse Guards now, a tribute in words and music to the three services.
Hark, I hear the tramp of thousands and of armored men that hum. Lo, a nation's hosts have gathered around the quick, alarming drum, saying, come, free men, come, ere your heritage be wasted, said the quick, alarming drum.
Eternal Father, strong to save, whose arm doth bind the restless wave, who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea.
Keith Michelle was born in Adelaide, the capital of South Australia, and Joan Plowright's husband, Lord Olivier, of course, served in the Fleet Air Arm. the masked mounted bands of the Household Cavalry, led by Leonidas, the drum horse of the Life Guards, and Constantine, the drum horse of the Blues and Royals, move on to the parade ground as the music changes from the senior service to the army.
It's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy go away. But it's thank you, Mr. Atkins, when the band begins to play. Yes, making mock of uniforms that guard you while you sleep is cheaper than them uniforms, and they're starvation cheap. And hustling drunken soldiers when they're going large a bit is 5 times better business than parading in full kit. Then it's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy, how's your soul? But it's thin red line of heroes when the drums begin to roll. The drums begin to roll, me boys, the drums begin to roll. Oh, it's thin red line of heroes when the drums begin to roll.
Words by Rudyard Kipling, who lost a son at the Battle of Loos in the First World War. Lastly, the Royal Air Force.
Do not despair for Johnny Head in Air. He sleeps as sound as Johnny Underground. Fetch out no shroud for Johnny in the cloud, but keep your tears for him in after years. Better by far for Johnny the bright star to keep your head and see his children fed.
Now we go to Ireland, but first on Horse Guards, an Irish melody and the words of Thomas Moore.
The minstrel boy to the war hath gone. In the ranks of death you'll find him. His father's sword he hath girded on, and and his wild harp slung behind him. Land of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betrays thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful harp shall praise thee.
The members of the Royal Tara dance troupe are aged from 8 to 28. It was formed almost 30 years ago and includes winners of championships here in Ulster and in the United States. Now the Hamilton Flute Band from Londonderry. It's 140 years old and its music ranges from the classical to familiar local tunes. Now the mass bands from all three services strike up with St. Patrick's Day.
And the mood changes again as in London on Horse Guards we evoke the Far East.
And this is how I see the East. I have seen its secret places and have looked into its very soul. This was the East of the ancient navigators, so old, so mysterious, resplendent and somber, living and unchanged, full of danger and promise. And these were the men. I have known its fascination since. I have seen the mysterious shores, the still water, the lands of brown nations, where a stealthy nemesis lies in wait, pursues, overtakes so many of the conquering races who are proud of their wisdom, of their knowledge, of their strength. But for me, all the East is contained in that vision of my youth.
Youth by Joseph Conrad. Saeed Jaffrey was born in India and brought up in Lucknow during the war. We remember now young men from Britain and the Empire whose war took them to inhospitable jungles, steaming swamps and muddy rivers in the east that lies beyond India. In March 1945, the capture of Mandalay, the ancient royal capital, was one of the last great battles of the war in Burma. Turner's tribute to the Gurkhas.
My thoughts return to you who were my comrades, the stubborn and indomitable peasants of Nepal. Once more, I hear the laughter with which you greeted every hardship. Once more, I see you in your bivouacs or about your fires, on forced march or in the trenches, now shivering with wet and cold, now scorched by a pitiless and burning sun. Uncomplaining, you endure hunger and thirst and wounds, and at the last your unwavering lines disappear into the smoke and wrath of battle. Bravest of the brave, most generous of the generous, never had a country more faithful friends than you.
Garrett Green was born in India and served with the Gurkhas. 200,000 Gurkhas fought in the Second World War. They suffered 43,000 casualties in the two World Wars and won 26 Victoria Crosses for their gallantry. The pipes and drums of the 3rd Battalion, the Royal Gurkha Rifles, marching at the rifleman's 140 paces to the minute, enter playing Bonnie Dundee, which will be followed by the Strathspey, Captain Horn, the Reel, the Pipe of Drummond, and their own Yo Nepali. Words of Longing now by Robert Louis Stevenson from the land of the Great War Pipe.
Blows the wind today, the sun and the rain are flying. Blows the wind on the moors today, and now, where about the graves of the martyrs the whomps are crying, my heart remembers how. Grey recumbent tombs of the dead in desert places, standing stones on the vacant wine-red moor, hills of sheep and the homes of the silent vanished races, and winds, austere, pure, be it granted me to behold you again in dying, hills of home, and to hear again the call, hear about the graves of the martyrs, the peewees crying, and hear no more at all.
The tunes, the heroes of Kohima and Over the Chindwin, names that still ring loud for many soldiers. And now the massed pipes and drums at Edinburgh Castle remind us that on this VJ weekend, we're also marking the end of World War II in all its phases. The band plays The Heroes of St Valery, written for the 51st Highland Division, which saw so much in those years.
Say not the struggle naught availeth, the labour and the wounds are vain. The enemy faints not nor faileth, and as things have been, they remain. For not by eastern windows only, when daylight comes in the light. In front, the sun climbs slow, how slowly. But westward look, the land is bright.
Words made famous by Winston Churchill in a moving broadcast on the 27th of April 1941, when Britain stood alone and looked westward to the United States for encouragement and help. That great transatlantic alliance in the Pacific and in Europe is encapsulated now in the music being played by the mass bands of the three services. The longest day, 6th of June, 1944, the day of the Allied landings in Normandy. The two guns of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, which later will be fired, one to signal the beginning, the other the end of the 2-minute silence in which we shall all later be joining. The valiant years. The Second World War ended formally on the 2nd of September 1945 when the instruments of surrender were signed. It was 6 years but for one day since the war began on Sunday, the 3rd of September, 1939. promise of better times to come.
Who, gazing at a vista of beauty, sees the clouds close in and turns his back in sorrow, hearing the thunderclouds begin, so we, whose life was all before us, our hearts with sunlight filled, left in the hills our books and flowers, descended and were killed. Write on the stones no words of sadness, only the gladness due, that we, who asked the most of living, knew how to give it to.
Olikiti Meliora by Frank Thompson, who was dropped into Yugoslavia in January 1944 and was shot in Bulgaria in June 1944. Blake's Jerusalem, Maria Ewing, Andrew Levison, the choir, and the orchestra in Pierre Jesu by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Holy Jesus, who takes away the sins of the world, give them peace.
Mundi
round the arena. 700 children from Finchley Children's Music Group and from 12 schools all over London. Enter now with candles. The audience too have lit their candles. And they are singing Non Nobis Domine, not unto us, O Lord, the praise and the glory. Music by Roger Quilter, words by Kipling. Since Queen Victoria became Empress of India in 1876, Indian officers have attended upon the sovereign at certain ceremonial events. Appropriately, tonight, the Queen is attended by the 2 Gurkha orderly officers appointed to Her Majesty's household for this year, as she walks with the Duke of Edinburgh through the London school children who formed a huge cross before the stage. The Queen will speak from the central lectern on the stage, and after that the last post will be sounded by buglers from the corps of drums of the 1st Battalion, the Grenadier Guards. This will be followed by a reading by a young cadet under-officer, Peter Baker, those unforgettable words inscribed on the Kohima Memorial, where the tide of Japanese advance in India was halted in 1944. Thereafter, 2 minutes silence will be observed before the sounding of reveille by buglers of the Royal Marine. The stage are assembled standards of 10 ex-service organisations and the flags of 7 Commonwealth nations who fought side by side in the Far East.
In every part of the United Kingdom this weekend, we have been commemorating the 50th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. This has been the culmination of 6 years of wartime anniversaries, each one with its own distinctive theme and flavour. In 1990, the Battle of Britain commemorations reminded us of the tense days of summer in 1940 and the heroism of the Royal Air Force throughout the war. The El Alamein commemorations in 1992 recalled for us not only a turning point in the war, but also the gallantry of our armies through all those long years of 1939 to 1945. Then, in Liverpool 2 years ago, in appropriately stormy weather, we paid tribute to the Royal Navy, who guarded our sea lanes and kept them open, and whose vital contribution to victory can never be forgotten. In May of this year, we celebrated the end of the war in Europe, and our purpose was clear. We met our former enemies in a spirit of reconciliation. We reaffirmed our ties with our wartime allies, and we looked forward with the young to the future. Our purpose over these last 2 days of VJ commemorations have been equally clear: to thank those who fought for their country and to remember those who died. The Second World War was the most destructive war in history. We fought it against an evil which threatened our freedom and our way of life. Many and deep were the scars it left, physical and mental. Our dogged endurance left our resources much depleted. Yet in the end, we came through triumphant. It is right, therefore, that those who enabled us to achieve the victory should take pride of place in these final commemorations. Tonight, we salute them, just as we did on VJ Day 50 years ago. Like so many others, I have vivid memories of VJ Day and of joining with the nation and our allies around the world in celebrating the long-awaited coming of peace. Meanwhile, Prince Philip was serving in the Far East on board a destroyer in Japanese waters. On that day in 1945, he was not part of a forgotten fleet. Indeed, there were no forgotten armies. There was just a vast number of men and women who had fought for and saved the future of the free world. I am speaking not only of the troops from the Commonwealth, but also of the nurses, firemen, miners, factory workers, merchant seamen, of all who, in that time-honored phrase, did their bit. We pay tribute to those who survived and remember with sorrow, but with gratitude, those who did not. Together, they gave us the chance to build a world anew. It may be a far from perfect world, but let us not tonight dwell on imperfections. Rather, let us call to mind the qualities which brought us through those terrible years: the courage, the comradeship, and above all, the sense of common purpose. They are still with us, and we must cherish them, for they have served us well down the centuries. Victory and the peace it brought 50 years ago were worth the great sacrifice. It is for us now, through God's mercy and our own continuing vigilance, to prove that the sacrifice was not made in vain.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today.
whole nation remembers. From a Mass begun by Gabriel Fauré and completed by André Messager, the children sing O Salutaris, O Saving Victim, opening wide the gate to man below. The Children's Song
Land of our birth,
by Kipling.
we pledge to thee our love and toil in the years to be, when we are grown and take our place as men and women with our race.
Teach us the strength that cannot seek by deed or thought to hurt the weak, that, under thee, we may possess man's strength to comfort man's distress.
Land of our birth, our faith, our pride,
for whose dear sake our fathers died. O motherland, we pledge to thee head, heart and hand through the years to be.
To 12-year-olds, and now I vow to thee, my country, music by Host, words by Sir Cecil Spring Rice. finally, to the tune The Old Hundredth, arranged by Vaughan Williams, the metrical version of the 100th Psalm. All people that on earth do dwell, sing to the Lord with cheerful voice. With that ascription of praise to Almighty God, the first part of this Sunday evening's tribute has ended here at Horse Guards, and now the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, with Prince Edward, led by the massed mounted bands of the Household Cavalry, which have moved already into the approach road, and the mass bands of the three services, who march even now to take up their position there also. And accompanied by the 700 children, each still carrying a lighted torch, followed by Sir David Wilcox, the conductor, the choir, the Queen's car, which he moves towards now, will move down the Mall to Buckingham Palace for the final act of this day, the sunset ceremony and the lowering of the colours. The Queen's Lord Lieutenant for Greater London, Field Marshal Lord Bramall, salutes. The Duke of Edinburgh and Prince Edward get in the car, and we shall journey with them towards the completion of an evening few who are here will ever forget. The night we remembered how the world found itself at peace again 50 years ago, weary and spent, and hurting from the long struggle to regain its freedom, anxious for the future, but filled with thankfulness and hope, and the desire for a truly different sort of world. And now the children follow in behind the royal car. And the mass bands play a tune as they move off, which is a tribute to those brave men of so many nations who fought against all that nature and a fierce enemy could muster to finish the job, the Burma campaigners. mass bands of the three services march smartly, the children more informally form a huge snake, and the choir join them to walk down behind the royal car through the Mall to the palace. They reckon the journey may take some 17 minutes. But here we are, still in the approach road, under the flags of the Commonwealth. And this is the splendid scene along the Mall looking towards Admiralty Arch. And you can see in the shadows and in the lamplight of the Mall there are still people, many, many hundreds of people who have waited for hours to see the Queen's journey home. And the massed mounted bands of the household cavalry making their way home with a certain spring in their step. Perhaps they know that Knightsbridge is not much further than Buckingham Palace. And what a wonderful sight. The horses walking, the bands marching, and the children walking with their torches. Beyond the gates of Admiralty Arch, the life of London goes on. Can anybody be unaware of what is happening here? And so, as we journey to Buckingham Palace with the Queen, we journey also through the darkness now to Wales to hear the glorious sound of Welsh voices raised in song at Cardiff Castle.
Cardiff's evening draws to a close, appropriately enough led by the massed choir Ar Hyd Nos, one of the most popular elements from the Welsh folk repertoire, all through the night.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Love, fear not, if sad thou dreaming all through the night, though o'ercast bright stars are gleaming all through the night. And Her Majesty the Queen, on the way home to Buckingham Palace, and like bright stars in some distant galaxy, the 700 torchlight candles that surround the Queen's car, as the music of the band echoes through the trees of St James's Park over the rooftops of Carlton Terrace and Pall Mall. In the Mall, the statue of King George VI seems to turn his glance to see the children disappearing like fading memories of war into the darkness of the years. 4 hours after the news of the unconditional surrender reached London on VJ Day, the King and Queen set off in an open carriage pulled by 4 Windsor Greys with a mounted escort dressed in khaki for the opening of a new session of Parliament at Westminster. There was a new Prime Minister, elected only 3 weeks before the ending of the war, and a new government facing the immense task of rebuilding post-war Britain. But the notice on the King's door that August day might well have been business as usual. He hadn't appeared in public out of uniform for 6 years, and with Queen Elizabeth had won a place of rare affection in the nation's heart. What sights there are this late summer evening in the Mall. The massed mounted bands of the Household Cavalry. The stands at Buckingham Palace crowded too. The children walking and running in their excitement at getting there and sharing in a part of history. This is where the sunset ceremony will take place. But what celebrations are there on this musical journey down memory lane across the water in Northern Ireland?
As a lone piper plays oft in the stilly night, we remember all who died as servicemen or civilians. The Belfast gunners I mentioned earlier epitomise the bewilderment of war. While they were defending London against the Blitz, the Luftwaffe was attacking their families in a largely undefended Belfast. A year or 2 later, they were in Burma, helping to bring the war to an end.
So oft in the stilly night in Ireland, and here the night is anything but stilly, as the Queen drives round the Queen Victoria Memorial. Behind the massed bands, the car lit up so that those in the stands can see the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh plainly. And the mass bands bringing her home with martial music to this last quiet act of the tribute of a nation to the men who fought, and the women too, in the Second World War. And may they never know what war is like. children arriving to take their places around the Queen Victoria Memorial, and the choir too. The mass bands take up their position, fronting the central gate of Buckingham Palace. The mass-mounted bands have moved within the forecourt. And all the time, members of the public too, coming along the Mall, under the trees, and now out in the Mall itself, to join the crowds in the stands around Buckingham Palace. And on horse guards, not a soul has left. They're watching too this scene on screens, as all through this evening they've been watching the scenes from Ireland and from Wales and from Scotland. Members of that marvellous choir. The Queen already on the dais in front of the central gateway to Buckingham Palace with the Duke of Edinburgh, the children crowding all around her. And the choir too, now taking up its position. Choir drawn from members of the Bach Choir, the English Baroque Choir, the Goldsmiths Choral Union, the London Choral Society, London Oriana Choir, the London Welsh Chorale, the Philharmonia Chorus, and the Royal Choral Society. And now all are more or less in position for the beginning of the sunset ceremony. O valiant hearts, who to your glory came, through dust of conflict and through battle flame. Tranquil you lie, your knightly virtue proved, your memory hallowed in the land you loved. Now everybody will join in. Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens. Lord, with me abide. privilege of hearing the next hymn, sung by men of the 14th Army on a Sunday evening in a jungle clearing 50 years ago. The brethren neath the western sky were suddenly our families and our loved ones here at home. Sunset, the lowering of the colours, the flags of the Commonwealth nations, the flags of our allies in the conflict in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, the colours of the three services, and the Union flags. From high on the rooftop of Buckingham Palace, a lament for the heroes of Kohima, played by pipers of the Royal Gurkha Rifles. the national anthem.
Three cheers for Her Majesty. Hip hip. Hip hip. Hip hip.
And so the cheers ring out for Her Majesty the Queen here at this incredible site at Buckingham Palace. And as the Queen turns to walk back into the palace, the formal ceremonial of this final tribute is ended. But the poignant and sometimes unbearable remembering goes on. For as long as there are those who grieve for the loss of fathers, husbands, sons, and brothers, that lie now somewhere far from the homes they left behind, half a day and half a world away. For as long, too, as there are those who carry with them in their minds and bodies the indelible scars of things that happened 50 years ago. I spoke once to a man who'd helped to build this railway, who had suffered nearly 3 years of hardship, brutality and illness in the very camp by the River Kwai where now this cemetery has brought its own kind of silent and unforgiving peace. What do you remember of those days of horror and despair? I asked him. There was a long pause. I remember the butterflies that came to the trees in the evening, he replied, and the beautiful sunsets. Perhaps he speaks to all of us, as 50 years on we mark, with understandable gratitude and pride, and with unutterable sadness too, the ending of the most universal and costly war in the whole story of humankind.
The mood of these past 2 days has swung from sadness, remembering so much suffering, so many lives destroyed, to celebration that it was not in vain. It hasn't been a great party, that was never the intention. But at times it has been a great spectacle, the fireworks and the flypasts and the marching bands, and tonight. But above all, it's been a great antidote to cynicism, especially for those of us who've been here since the weekend began, talking to old soldiers and hearing their stories. One old man, covered with medals for his service in Burma, told me how he missed all the celebrations when the war ended because he was still out there. And when he came home, there was nothing. 3 years of sheer hell, and when the troopship docked at Southampton, no band, no cheers, nothing. And then, yesterday, he set off down the Mall to salute his monarch, as he put it, for the first time. And I saw him afterwards, and he said the crowd was shouting, "Thank you, thank you." And I felt like weeping. But he didn't, of course. He's still a proud old soldier. Many of us did. Well, the crowds will soon be going home, much to remember, to ponder. And we could do worse now, perhaps, than listen again to the words of King George VI, addressing a joyful nation half a century ago.
The war is over. You know, I think, that those 4 words have for the Queen and myself the same significance, simple, yet immense, that they have for you. Our hearts are full to overflowing, as are your own. Yet there is not one of us who have experienced this terrible war who does not realize that we shall feel its inevitable consequences long after we have all forgotten our rejoicings of today.
And Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh have come out on the balcony. And the crowd sing Rule Britannia. Quite suddenly the mood has switched completely once again. We've lost 50 years and people are at the palace gates. As Her Majesty the Duke of Edinburgh acknowledge the cheers, a word to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, if she's watching this scene in her little castle, the Castle of May, on the north coast of Scotland. She's been very much in people's hearts down here too, on this weekend of commemoration of which she is so much a part. And the Queen goes into the palace. Tonight she'll be spending on the Royal Yacht Britannia in the Pool of London. The crowds sing Land of Hope and Glory. It's the end of a momentous 2 days for all of us, when we've recalled history and when perhaps some new history has been made, as we've shown again our infinite capacity as a nation for remembering and honouring those ordinary men and women to whom we owe everything. Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh looking at crowds that reach as far as the eye can see, right up to Admiralty Arch. And the Queen goes in once again.
So now, after those unscheduled but hugely welcome appearances by the Queen on the balcony, just as her father did 50 years ago, now at last the party, I'd said it wasn't a party, but it ended like a party. Now the crowds really will be going home. It's been a great evening. It's been a great weekend. Good night.